Morning, sir.
Good morning.
Morning, sir.
Good morning. Today people are not in the mood for a class, huh? Shall we get started?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I suppose this had to happen. In economics, you have the falling rate of marginal utility. And Marx had a theory called falling rate of profit. In my case, I suppose it is the falling rate of attendance. Okay, today we will be continuing with the influences on Plato, okay, under which we did um, under this visit we did Xenophanes, then we did Parmenides, then we did Zeno, the important thing is that there is yet another person who is uh, a very big influence on Plato, and he precedes even Xenophanes and Parmenides. But I didn't do this chronologically because if you do it chronologically, then there will be a break in understanding how Pythagoras actually uh, contributed to the thought of Plato. Okay, as I told you yesterday, one of the important things to remember is that Plato was a mathematician, and Plato was, when we talk about Greek mathematicians, they are more into geometry than they are into arithmetic. Please remember that. Okay, they are not so much into arithmetics as they are into geometry. Uh, and Plato was definitely a mathematician, and that influence came to him from Pythagoras. So when you talk about uh, Pythagoras, let us try to see who Pythagoras is. From when the days when we had, what do we say? When we had composite maths, in which we used to do the does anyone remember the Pythagorean theorem? Hmm?
Yes, sir.
Tell me, what is it?
I forgot it, sir. 10th class, I.
Hmm. The Pythagorean theorem says in a right angled triangle, the square on the hypotenuse is equal to the sum of the squares on the other two sides. Okay, that's what it says, right? So that is a famous Pythagorean theorem, but he did more other things as well. But you must understand that all the Greek mathematicians, talking of mathematicians, here comes the mathematician. Why write that down? All Greek mathematicians were also philosophers, and they tried to use mathematics as a way of, uh, what should I say? They have tried to use mathematics as a way of understanding the universe. So when you use mathematics in order to understand the universe, then you're using a system of logic which is called deductive reasoning. Okay, it's called deductive reasoning, and you will see that under deductive reasoning there are other things that they used. Okay, the most famous being the syllogism. Syllogism is three-staged deduction. Uh, I think I told you that in ancient India, this was called Tripada. Tripada is three-legged. Tripada Tarka. In ancient India, we have this whole Shastra called the Tarka Shastra or logic. So we find this being used. And yesterday I demonstrated to you that within syllogism, you have dialectical syllogism being used by Zeno. I'm not going to go back into epikairema, okay? Uh, but dialectics have existed independently of the syllogism as well. Okay, dialectical thinking is independent of or can be independent of syllogistic thinking. But there is a great difference in the dialectics of ancient period, that is Greece, and in the modern period. In the modern period, you'll find two people using dialectics. One of them is Hegel, who uses it rather well, and he's more consistent with the dialectics of the ancient period. But you also have Marx using it. People will tell you Engels also uses it, and I will also tell you that Engels uses it. But Engels' usage of the dialectics is based in a misunderstanding of what the dialectic is and not in the proper understanding of what constitutes the dialectics. So that is the unfortunate aspect. So what we need to do now, therefore,
Sir,
yeah,
sir,
yes.
what is meant by dialectic, sir?
See, dialectics, I was just going to come to that anyway. In the modern sense of the term with Hegel, um, in Hegel, the dialectic is gaining knowledge through a series of negations which can also be confirmations. Okay, this is what you find in Hegel. Now, let me explain this to you with a very, very stupid example. And there are two reasons why I use stupid examples. One reason is I am stupid myself. And the other is that stupid examples sometimes serve the purpose of clarification. Okay. Now, let us say you go to a multiplex. Where are you now? Are you in Hanmakonda or in
In
Hyderabad?
Varangal, sir.
In
In
Varangal.
Varangal.
Okay, but let's say you're in Hyderabad for a moment. Let's imagine that. You go to Prasad's IMAX, and in front of you, you see one fellow, very fat and got longish hair. Okay, is having a problem carrying his weight. So he said, this looks like Satish Chandra. You're seeing him from behind, not from the front. Okay. So the first step is that looking at this person, you get the thought that this could be Satish Chandra who's walking in front of me at a little distance. Now you would want to see if it is Satish Chandra or not. So you go closer. When you go closer, what happens is you get the idea that this is Satish Chandra. Okay. So this is the second step, which seems to be that this is Satish Chandra, but you still are not sure. So what will you do? You will go to the front of the person to try and get a look at the face, because that will be the ultimate confirmation. And you look at the face and when somebody's face is there is a bit of disturbance. Yeah, when somebody's face is clear to you, then you think, yes, this is Satish Chandra. Now, this is the third stage in which you have had the confirmations, a confirmation of the original thought that you had, which is this could be Satish Chandra. Okay, so this is how Hegel will say dialectics operate. But I'll also give you another situation. The same thing is happening. You're in Prasad's IMAX. There is a fat man walking in front of you. Has longish hair. Incidentally, I don't usually have long hair, but I'm scared to go to a barber with COVID. So anyway, so you'll say, let me see if this person is Satish Chandra. You go closer. Step one. Then it does appear like Satish Chandra. Then you'll say, let me go closer still. When you go closer still, it looks like the person may not be Satish Chandra. So you say, let me go to the front of this person, look at his face. You look at his face, and it is not Satish Chandra. So you have confirmed knowledge now that this is not Satish Chandra. Now, what you have to look at is that the first thought is a doubt. Is this Satish Chandra? Okay, that is what you will find as the first thought, which is a doubt. It's not confirmed. Then you go a little closer. It feels like it may be Satish Chandra, but it is still doubtful. But the amount of doubt that you had is now no longer as much as it was. So it is a negation of that first doubt. Then you go closer still, and it appears to be, yeah, Satish Chandra. So this is again the negation of the second doubt. This could be Satish Chandra. Could be is not confirmed. Now you feel, yes, this seems to be Satish Chandra. So this is a negation of that. Now, when you say, I'll go to the front and I'll see if this is Satish Chandra by looking at his face. Okay, then if you look at the face and you see it is Satish Chandra, that confirmation is also a negation of what was still a doubt. It looks like it is Satish Chandra. You were not sure. You were not certain about it. Right? So when you get the confirmation that this is Satish Chandra, right? Then that also is a negation. A confirmation is a negation. How? Because it negates a doubt and makes it certain. A doubt is always uncertain. And when you make certain, then it is Satish Chandra. It is a negation of the doubt. So a confirmation is also a negation. Okay. Now, if you take the second instance where you go and find out it is not Satish Chandra, that is also a confirmation of a doubt. The doubt is you thought, yes, this could be Satish Chandra. But when you have found that it is not Satish Chandra, it is a confirmation. The confirmation is no, this is not Satish Chandra, and it is a negation of the series of doubts that you have had. It's a final negation, which is the confirmation. Okay, so you can actually imagine it better. Let us say you see somebody, you've gone again, let's say you've gone to the same multiplex or IMAX, which is also a multiplex. So you go there, you see somebody from your past, okay? Somebody you didn't see after your 7th class. Looks very familiar. Could this be, let's call that person X. Could this be that person? Now follow the same steps and add one more step in this. Because the person looks extremely familiar to you, you go and you ask him, is this, are you by any chance so and so? And did you by any chance study? Which school did you go to?
Platinum Jubilee, sir.
What?
Platinum Jubilee.
Platinum Jubilee. Okay. So you'll ask him, did you go to Platinum Jubilee school? And suppose he says yes, that's a confirmation. But even if he says no, it is a confirmation. Why? Because he's confirming what you thought is right or that it is wrong. That confirmation is what you have to have in your mind. Have you got what I'm trying to say?
Yes, sir.
So for Hegel, the dialectic is the way you think by juxtaposing opposites. The opposites being doubt with no doubt. Okay, but that doesn't happen in one step. And Hegel doesn't say, a lot of people, now that you've taken me there, let me finish it properly. Have you heard of this man?
Didn't hurt, sir.
Actually, his full name is Johann Fichte. That's how you have to, the original pronunciation would have been Johann Fichte. That would have been the original pronunciation. But I told you the Germans didn't want the language to sound guttural. So they have softened the sound of h with sh. So it becomes Fichte. Otherwise it's Fichte. Okay. So Johann Fichte, this I'm sure you have heard, posited this thing called every thesis has an antithesis and the tussle between the thesis and the antithesis
Synthesis.
culminates. That's Rachna.
Synthesis.
Is that Rachna?
Yes, sir. I'm Rajni.
Visiting student. You'll be there for some time and sometime you're gone.
No, sir. Yesterday, my data is completed. That's why.
Okay. Okay. This is actually attributed to Hegel.
Yes, sir. Hegel told, I think.
No, he didn't. This was told by this man, Johann Fichte.
Hegel also used to say
No,
so.
he didn't,
This
ma'am.
is like,
He did not use it. That is wrong. All the books that you read give you that rubbish. They also tell you dialectical materialism is Marx.
Marx.
It's not.
It's Hobbes, I think, no?
Hmm?
Scientific materialism. Thomas Hobbes, I think, sir.
No, no,
Scientific
no, no,
materialism.
no, 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 no. Hobbes never talked about all those things. Dialectical materialism is not Marx. You can read any book of Marx, you don't find dialectical materialism in it. Dialectical materialism, in fact, creates difficulties for Marx's philosophy. It was the work of this man, Engels. He talked about um, dialectical materialism. Marx talked about historical materialism. Okay, not dialectical materialism. Now you must understand that Fichte, this particular thing is not used by anyone, including Hegel. Hegel believed that everything happens at the level of thought. And that is why Hegel, along with Thomas Hill Green, is considered to be the modern idealist. I'll explain idealism when we come to Plato. And later on, I will tell you how Plato's idealism is different from Hegel's idealism. Okay, they are two very, very different things. Though both will be called, uh, idealism. And Green's idealism is further different. Okay, now this thing has no value in social sciences, what Johann Fichte basically talked about. Hegel says how we think is dialectical, okay, or rather, how we should think is dialectically, by positing a proposition, then putting something which doubts this, then again putting another step here which doubts this also. So the Hegelian dialectic, which is a pure thought process, does not have a set number of stages. Whereas here, you have a set number of stages. You have a thesis, you have an antithesis, and there is a compromise between the thesis and the antithesis, which leads to a synthesis. So you know that anything which is synthetic is, like, for example, you'll say terracotta. I don't know if that word is still being used, right? Terracotta is considered to be a synthetic material, which is, it has a blend of terraline and cotton. Okay, so that is a cloth which has a blend of terraline and cotton is a synthetic thing. It's a synthetic cloth. Okay, so in Hegel, there is no such thing as something has to be a synthesis. Not necessary. What you start off as the first thought can be confirmed. There is no necessity to believe that it will not be confirmed. There'll be an antithesis, and both of these will come together to form the synthesis. He doesn't believe in that. For him, the dialectical form of thinking is only elimination of doubt till such time that you reach certainty. Till such time that you reach certainty, you have doubt, and this can be in one step, the dialectic, or it can be in 15 steps. Hegel doesn't say 3 steps. Okay, so what you're looking at is Fichte. Now, if you look at Marxian dialectic, Marx believes that all history is history of class struggle. Okay, so for him, in the feudal period, the two classes that are, he says that the primitive period is relatively egalitarian. There are no classes, but the feudal period comes in with the accumulation of property by the mighty who lay claim to tracts of land and say, this is my private property. In the primitive society, there is no such thing. Okay, you have hunter gatherers and nomadic agriculturists. But in the feudal period, the second period, he doesn't actually call them the periods, and he doesn't call them history. Uh, he calls them modes of production. And I'll talk to you about that when we come to Marx. But for the time being, let's talk about it as a period in history. In the feudal period, you have the creation of classes, okay, which weren't there in the primitive period. So if you have classes, then what you are looking at is these two classes exist in a way that one thrives by exploiting the other. Now, there aren't only two classes. There are many classes, and classes, remember, is an economic denomination. But Marx says in any time period, anywhere, there are two dominant classes. In the feudal period, it is the aristocracy. The aristocracy is the landed gentry. Okay, gentry is the source of gentlemen. Okay, it is something which is in the nature of they own the land, but they don't till it. They give it out on rent to a peasant who not only has to pay rent but also share a part of the produce. Please remember there's a difference between produce and produce. When you say produce, you're producing something. Okay, I've just produced this pen in front of you from nowhere because you can't see from it. This is different. Produce is the agricultural produce which has come over a season. So produce is very different from produce. So he says they also have to apart from paying rent, in Telugu, I think it's called Kaula Kivadam. And apart from paying rent, you are also uh, giving away a part of the produce to the aristocrat. So the serf, the peasant becomes a servant because he needs to do agriculture for his living, but he doesn't have land. The aristocrat has land, and he uses that to exploit
Yeah.
the, yeah,
Why can't we say they are landlords?
call them landlords. No problem.
Okay.
Call them.
Mm.
No problem. They are landlords. But
Mm.
a landlord can also be somebody who has 500 yards. Okay. But when
Yeah.
you talk about an aristocrat, he has land which runs into hundreds of acres, usually, right? You can call them landlords. There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. So the aristocrat is exploiting the is basically exploiting the peasant or the servant. Serf, actually, it's not servant, it is the serf. The peasant is a serf, right? So there is essentially a tension between these two classes. Why is that a tension? It is a tension because of the fact that the aristocrats are exploiting the peasants. And they are not doing any work, the aristocrats, but they are taking rent and produce from the peasants. So because of that, he says contradictions develop between the aristocrat and the peasant or the serf. And when feudalism died, and he says it dies because you can't expect something to survive when all people in society are not being productive. Some people are only consuming, sitting back and consuming. Okay, so if they are consuming and the peasants are the ones who are producing, then obviously there comes a point when it becomes unsustainable. The agrarian economy becomes unsustainable, and therefore it gives way to capitalism. Now, Marx says the new is born out of the womb of the old. Okay, so capitalism is born from the womb of feudalism, which was dying. So he calls capitalism a negation of feudalism, which itself is a negation of primitive society. So capitalism for him is negation of a negation. Okay, and he said the in capitalism, it is the capitalist who doesn't do any work but owns the means of production, and therefore the capitalist will essentially say something to the effect of, you know, give me, I'll pay you money for doing work for me. Okay, but he doesn't do work. So as a result of this, it's a complicated thing which I don't want to go into. This is not about Marx. So he says again, contradictions develop between the working class, which he calls the proletariat, and the capitalist class, which he calls the bourgeois. Now, bourgeois comes from the French word bourgeois. Bourgeois is middle. Okay, bourgeois capitalist was something that was used by uh, Rousseau, and Marx is continuing to use that. He says this is a bourgeois class. Now, how is it a middle class? It's today when if I ask you, are you middle class? Then I'm basically asking you, what is your income? Okay, it's on the basis of income that you decide if somebody is poor, somebody is middle class, somebody is rich. And the middle class, of course, has been segmented into, lower middle class, upper middle class, middle class, right? And if you are Montexing Ahluwalia, you will say if you earn 31 rupees per day, you are not below the poverty line. Okay, so at that time, I used to write my blog, and I wrote in that, I will give Montek Singh Ahluwalia 31 rupees in one day, and let me see how he'll survive. One day, I'll take everything away from him and just give him only 31 rupees and ask him to survive. How will he survive? See, so we say below poverty line is if you have 31 rupees. Is that so? Really? So our wonderful Chief Minister of the undivided Andhra Pradesh, Dr. Y.S. Rajshekhar Reddy, what did he do? He told the World Bank that 33% of Andhra Pradesh, the then undivided Andhra Pradesh, was below the poverty line. And he went on to issue white ration cards to those who were below the poverty line. And when one looked at the number of ration cards that were issued, 74% of the population was below the poverty line. So these kind of manipulations people do wonderfully. So he tells the World Bank that we have only 33% below the poverty line, but he issues white cards to 74% of the population. So there's something seriously wrong here. Anyway, so what Marx is, to come back to Marx, he's basically saying contradictions develop between the worker and the capitalist. The bourgeois is because of the fact that he has emerged, this class has emerged from the dying throes of feudalism. On the one hand, let's start. On the one hand, you have a, what should we say, uh, the aristocrats. On the other hand, you have the peasants. When feudalism lost its power to generate wealth, everybody, including the king, started getting impoverished. Okay, so what happened is, according to Marx, from in between these two dominant classes of feudalism, from in between these two dominant classes came the capitalist class, mercantile capitalism, as he called it. Okay, and mercantile capitalism is the first form of capitalism. So he calls it the bourgeois class. Okay, why is it the bourgeois? Because it came from the middle of aristocrats and peasants. So capitalism is a negation of the negation, but it doesn't stop there. He says that because of the sharpening of the contradictions between the capitalist or the bourgeois class and the proletariat, okay, the working class, because of the sharpening of that, he says there should be a revolution. People will tell you Marx said communism will happen. Marx never said communism will happen. Please remember this. Marx said communism should be made to happen. And that is the reason why he did not believe in nation state boundaries. And he said, workers of the world, unite. Okay, workers of the world unite. And he believed that nation states were a creation of the capitalist system, very rightly. And he therefore said, workers of the world unite and throw out the capitalist and establish a communist society. And a question was asked of Marx. What will happen? Okay, let us say your revolution is a success. You mean to say there will be no more problems in the communist society? He said, I can't say. I cannot say. But Professor Stephen Rusis says there are enough indications in the Grundrisse written by Marx that he believes that the class tussle will go on even in the communist society. And therefore, he said it's a spiral. It's an unending spiral. It doesn't stop. So there are no two stages like this. Thesis, antithesis. No. It cannot be applied to historical materialism either. Either to historical materialism or the dialectical thought that Hegel sought to promote. I hope I have answered your question, Mr. Akshay Puneet.
Yes, sir.
That is a very long-winded answer, huh? Huh? That was also due to Madam Rachna. Today she stopped being a mathematician and started being a dialectician. I didn't know she was so versatile. Huh? What, madam?
Yes, sir.
You're very versatile. Mhm.
About subject, sir.
About everything. Mm. You're a very versatile person.
Oh, I don't.
Ah, okay. Uh, so let's come back to dialectics of the Greek variety. Okay, there is a word which came from Greek, which is called trivium. Okay, actually it was called trivium. That's what people tell me. It's a Latin word rather than a Greek word, which talked about three methods of uh, gaining knowledge. One of them is dialectics. The second is that which is called I have forgotten the third one. I have some vague recollection, but I don't want to tell you that right now. Don't want to give you false impression. Sorry, a false information. But the Greeks believe that these three, which is the third one, I have some rough idea, but I'm not sure if that is the one. Anyway, but for now we don't need it. Let's see. By the next class, hopefully I'll remember it properly, and um, I'll remember it properly and be able to give you the correct answer. Okay, now Plato used dialectic, Aristotle used rhetoric. Okay, now what is dialectic? Dialectic is that EST is established, huh? It's not a Latin word, right? A process of argumentation that you take up in order to establish the truth. Rhetoric, on the other hand, is the process of persuasion to accept a viewpoint, point of view, it should be. Okay, so for the Greeks, the dialectic the dialectic was dialogue, which was argumentative. Okay, it was a dialogue which was argumentative. So if you read Plato's Republic, it is written in the form of dialogue, as is his very famous work, uh, the Dialogues of Plato. Okay, please don't use our filmy usage, kya dialogue mara, you know. So that's not what it is. A dialogue is a conversation of a certain type. Not all conversations are dialogues. Okay, a dialogue is a conversation of a type between two people, technically, or two parties, one upholding one idea and the other upholding this idea. A dialogue between them in the form of argumentation. Now, we believe today that there's something wrong with being argumentative. Okay, but you must understand that for the Greeks, the the idea of argumentation is not something which is negative. Okay, unfortunately, we have this man called Amartya Sen who got himself a Nobel Prize thanks to his connections, who wrote a book called The Argumentative Indian, in which he tries to project the Indians as people who argue about nothing, which is extremely unfortunate. Okay, so what we need to understand is that a dialogue was an argumentation. You argue your point, I will argue my point. Okay, and that is how people basically came to a conclusion through argumentation. But we still have to go to Pythagoras, who believed in deductive reasoning since his orientation was into mathematics. So we made a mention of his, we basically made a mention of his form of reasoning, which we said is deduction, which means that you look at a scenario, and by looking at that scenario, you deduce that something might have happened. So I think I've been talking about very not so unpleasant things. So let me give you a horrible example. Let's try to understand how deductive reasoning works. Okay, and so let me give you an example from crime. So let's talk about a crime. I am hopelessly addicted to this program called forensic files, or also medical detectives. Okay, and in that, what you will find is people solving cases through pure deductive reasoning. Okay, so how does it happen? So let's put it this way. There is a young girl who left her house around 6 in the evening to go buy some groceries. She doesn't return. So the police are informed that she hasn't returned home, and we are afraid something might have happened to her. So the police get into action. They start searching for the girl. First, they start searching in the nearby areas and slowly widen the perimeter. And a few days later, they find a body of a nude girl in a ditch a little away from the road. Okay, a little away from the road, and she's lying face down. So what do? They already have the description of the girl who's missing. So they'll see if this girl is the same girl. So let's say somebody says she's blonde. Blonde is having, the light colored hair. You have different kinds of blonde hair, platinum, strawberry. That's not a flavor, strawberry colored. So you have these hair types. So you say, yes, she has it. Then somebody says she had a mole on her back, and they see that there is a mole on the back. Now they know that this is that girl. Okay. Now they have to try and understand what actually happened. This is where the deductions begin. First and foremost, why is she naked? She's naked probably because there was sexual assault of some kind or rape. Okay. So that is one of the reasons why she's naked. The other is that the murder didn't happen here. Okay. Because there's no blood at that scene. There is no viscera at that scene. But because the person had to park the vehicle in which he brought that girl to that particular place in order to dump her in a ditch, he had to drive right up to the shoulder of the road. And if you drive right up to the shoulder of the road, then you are driving on a muddy patch where the tire imprint of the vehicle is left. Okay. So police will look at the tire imprint, looking at the size of the tire, the width, the impression. They will basically say that because of that width that you're seeing there, you are probably looking at somebody who brought this girl in an SUV or a sports utility vehicle like the Fortuner, Toyota Fortuner in India, or the, you know, Kia Seltos, whatever. Then you'll also try to see if there are foot marks, not necessarily of the feet, but of boots. So if they're there, then you collect that. Now, you deduce that person from the kind of footmark and the depth of the footmark. How deep is it? And how loose is the soil? From that, you will deduce, deductive, deduce whether that person was heavy built or light built. If he was heavy, the boot mark will be very, very prominent. If the person is not very heavy, then it won't be too light, too heavy. It won't be too deep. Okay, so that way you have established. Now then what will you do? You have the imprint of the tire and you have the imprint of a boot. So you will try to see who makes a tire, because tires have treads. And most tire companies make their own tread marks. They make their own designs of the treads. Okay, so you'll say, let us try to find out which tire this is. And looking at it, you will come to a conclusion that it is a Firestone X Max tire. Okay, and you look at the boot and you say this is a Go Hill boot of the size 10. So the person must have been having large feet. And if it is a bit deep, you will say he was probably tall and heavy. That is how you deduce. You start making a profile of how the whole thing would have happened. So you'll say the murder was committed elsewhere, but brought here. The body was brought here and dumped. Okay. So people will now try to find out how many vehicles were sold with that kind of a tire. How many SUVs were sold? So you will go and take a list of people who have bought those tires. And you'll also try to see which were the stores in a certain perimeter again, which sold Go Hill boots that had that kind of a sole. So you're working in both directions. Then you get suspects. Then you'll ask people, did you see somebody in this kind of a vehicle? A tallish person, probably, thickly built and wearing shoes. And with Go Hill shoes, people wear jeans, denims. So they'll say wearing denims. So somebody says, yes, I did see somebody like that on that evening. Yes, now that you say, this was at around 7:30. And then you'll ask, what color was the vehicle? And what kind of this thing, shirt and other things was this man wearing? Describe whatever face you can give. So what they do is a composite sketch. Based on the description given, they make a composite sketch. They deduce that this is how the person should look. and then the composite sketch is actually circulated. And while they are circulating the composite sketch, they are also trying to, in the background, looking at the owners of various SUVs with that color and that make of tire, and looking at photographs of the owners which may match the composite sketch that they have drawn. So that is a process of deduction. So they catch hold of that person. They'll send the body for autopsy to find out if there has been a rape or if there hasn't been a rape. So all these will be deduced. Deduced is deduction from the various clues that are available. That is deductive reasoning. So it is used extensively in different types of things, including solving crime. Now, Pythagoras should be, it's not that he's the first person to have used deductive reasoning, but Pythagoras should be considered as that person who took recourse to deductive reasoning to establish the veracity of a given proposition. Okay, veracity, you understand that? Anyone? Ladies, gentlemen, has everybody gone away?
No, sir.
No,
Mm.
No, sir.
What is veracity?
Proof.
No, it is this, not capital T. Truth. Okay. Suppose you say, for instance, lions in India. Let's be very, specific, because there are lions only in the Gir forest. That is the last habitat of the Asiatic lion, which is a little different from the African lion. And probably because it's there in India, I find it to be a better looking lion than the African lion. I don't know, maybe that's just my Indian bias. Now, somebody says that the Asiatic lions do not feed on human beings. Then you say, on what basis are you saying this? That person says, okay, I have seen various video footages. Okay, I have seen various video footages of lions crossing the streets. Okay, and not streets, roads, sorry. And even people on two-wheelers just stop and give way to the lions. And the lions pass. They don't attack the human beings. I don't know if you got this video on WhatsApp of
Yes, sir. There are many incidents like
there was an instance when lions went and sat in went into the compound of a house in Junagadh. 3 lions, but they didn't do anything to the people. Okay, so you say lions don't kill people. Somebody says, I don't know. I find this unbelievable. So let's test it out. The hypothesis is that lions do not harm people, human beings. Let's be specific. So we say, let's go to the Gir forest. So you go to the Gir forest. Has anyone been to the Gir forest?
in Gujarat, no, sir.
Yes.
I don't.
Nobody's been to the Gir forest. You should go there. And I saw something which I still find unbelievable. Okay? There is a village, and about a village is a real village, hamlet kind of a thing, not a big village, a hamlet where a few hundred or maybe just about a few thousand people live. Unlikely that it'll be a few thousand, but yeah, could be. Anyway, so the person who took me there said, I'll show you a miracle. I said, what is this miracle? He said, tonight we'll go there to this village. I forgot what that village's name was. And this village was there, and about 50 to 60 feet away from the village, you have 5 lions peacefully sitting, some of them sleeping. And he said, let's stay on the road and see. I was scared being so close. I was absolutely scared. But I said, it's okay. Let's see. If I have to die, I'll die. So I stood there. And I said, what is this you're trying to prove to me? He said, wait. 10 minutes later, 3 people come there to somewhere around where we were standing. What do they have with them? They have a hurricane lantern, and they have a bed roll. And what do? They unroll the bed and go to sleep, because those are the fields of these people. And they're not all sleeping at the same place. They're sleeping at different places. But none of them is more than 20 feet away from the lions. These people have gone to sleep there. If somebody had told me this story, I would have said, do I look like an idiot to you? I would have said that. But I was stunned to find that the lions did not even move. They also went to sleep. We waited there for half an hour to see if anything will happen. Nothing happened, so we drove back. My instinct was next day pick up the newspaper to see if somebody has been killed. There's nothing. And my friend laughed and said, "This happens every day. This is not a show put up for you." So that is the truth. So this establishes the truth.
It's, I think that lions are maybe habituated to see these human beings.
Maybe, but
Uh,
they don't attack human beings, and there is no evidence so far at any time of the Gir lions attacking human beings.
I think they have sufficient food.
Maybe, maybe all those things. There is a theory, by the way, among naturalists who study these different animals. I've also been to Ranthambore in a jeep, open jeep, okay, and not closed at all. And there were tigers about 5 feet away from me. The tigers didn't, they were least bothered. The only thing we were told is don't disturb them. And the jeep stopped, much to my consternation, where the tigers were, and nothing happened. So it's not just the lions, even the tigers don't attack. It has now been established that wild animals do not see human beings as their natural prey. What has just gone into my mouth? Sorry. I'm very sorry about that. Okay, so we are looking at a situation where people say that we are not the natural food of these animals. Human beings are not, because we are bipeds. Does anyone know what a biped is?
We walk on 2 foot,
2 feet.
2 feet.
Hmm. You are an English literature student, sir. Hmm. How can you walk on 2 foot? Hmm. Yeah. So they don't recognize us as prey animals. It's only when a tiger or a leopard is injured and cannot chase down prey, that is when they turn towards human beings. Otherwise, they don't. We are not their food. So that's a deduction because we are bipeds. So this is not something that's happening in this time. Even in the times when people lived in jungles, now there is evidence to suggest anthropological evidence, physical anthropological evidence to suggest that we were not the targets of carnivores. Not only we, but even the other bipeds like gorillas, bonobos, And to a certain extent, chimpanzees aren't as erect as bonobos and uh, gorillas, but they also are not attacked by, because they are bipeds, they are not attacked by wild carnivores.
Sir,
Even,
but there are some evidences where people have been attacked by these animals.
yeah, there was recently in, where in Adilabad, that is an injured tiger, no? They found that out. It killed two
Not
people.
only in Madhya Pradesh.
Yeah, it's usually if they are injured. You're talking about the Bandhavgarh guest house incident. What happens is if, and that is tigers, lions have never attacked, by the way. Uh, Leopards have rarely attacked. Tigers, if they become too old to hunt or if they are injured and cannot run, then they turn to human prey. That is there. I said that. But if they are young and fit, they don't look at you as prey. They don't look at you as prey. Okay?
Okay, sir.
Yeah. So that is deductive reasoning. It's deductive reasoning. Okay? Why don't carnivores look at human beings as food? Is because of our being bipeds. So they have not seen anybody like us. We are very different. And like I said, the great apes as well. The great apes, including orangutans, um, then the gorillas, the chimpanzees, and the bonobos, all these. So the establishment of the truth through a series of deductions is what is called deductive reasoning. Through a series of deductions. And this came from Pythagoras in a big way. There were other people too. There were other people too. But what Pythagoras did is something which is very, very different from what other people did. And that is the reason why you might have studied so many theorems. Have you seen any theorem? Can you name a theorem that is named after someone? Hmm?
Sir, one
Hmm.
second.
1 second.
Uh, uh,
Hmm.
Once repeat the question.
Repeat the question.
Mm,
Apart from the Pythagorean theorem, which is
mm,
named after Pythagoras, do you know of
uh,
any other theorem that is named after a human being?
Euclid's principle.
yes, sir.
Uh-huh.
Euclid.
Euclid didn't do theorems. Euclid's this thing is in three dimensionality.
Uh,
Euclidean three dimensionality. He has tried to establish that we see the world in three dimensions. It's not a theorem. It's not a theorem. Euclid didn't do theorems. Hmm. Actually, theory, since we are anyway going to be doing that, they come from these Greek words, Thea and Theoria. Okay, that is the root of theory, and to a certain extent the root of theorem. And initially all what am I doing? All theory was deductive. Okay, so
What about principles? I mean,
principles, what about them?
uh, is there these principles? All principles are like Newton, Rutherford. Some principles are there, no, sir? Are these also deductive?
Newton's physics is deductive. Which Rutherford are you talking about?
Atoms.
That is also deductive. That is also deductive. Hmm? You've heard of this? Since Madam is in a scientific mode. Have you heard of this word?
No, sir.
Positron is
Electron.
exactly the size of an electron.
Oh,
Okay? It is exactly the size of an electron. Bears the structure of an electron, but an electron is negatively charged, whereas a positron is positively charged. And positrons are rare. Okay? Positrons are very, very rare. So that was there with Rutherford. Yes, and they are all did deductions. Study and deduce. Matter, antimatter is also a deduction. Most of physics, mathematics, even today is deduction. Most of it. Okay, I think I've run out of time. We'll stop this excursions. Monday, when I see you, we'll get into Pythagoras and his direct influence on Plato, how he did that. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Thank you very much. But I just thought I'll take I see, otherwise people don't understand what is deductive reasoning. And that is the
Yes, sir.
reason why I spent a bit of time on it. And considering the fact that Plato is strongly deductive, it's a good idea to spend some time on it. And thank you for attending the class and staying on till the end. Thank you very much. Thank
Thank
you.
you, sir.
Thank you, Akshay.
thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.